This is the Radio Button Network. And this is the new Ace at Large podcast. Now, your host, Ace.
Well, some weeks are just more difficult than others. And for me, this is one of those weeks. This podcast started and became what it is because of an outpouring of love that you gave to me after my daughter died. And as I've told you before, you have lifted me up, and I've tried to give something back to you so that you know that whatever you're going through, you are not alone. The same way you've allowed me to have that same feeling. If you're grieving, you are definitely not alone this week. Told you before, I'm not a therapist, but I've been to a lot of therapy. I'm not an expert. I'm just a guy trying to navigate my way through a broken heart following the death of my daughter. There is a lot of good that's happening. And when you come to the Ace at Large podcast, we always try to look for the positive because I don't believe in wallowing in the bad. But some weeks are simply tougher than others. And for me, this is one of those weeks. I'll tell you why and see if we can navigate through this together. Next.
There's more of the new Ace at Large podcast next. Welcome back to the new Ace at Large podcast.
Well, like I told you a minute ago, some weeks are simply more difficult than others. And for me, this is one of those weeks. And here's why. Sunday marked 9 years to the day that my father died. January 24th, 2012. And as this podcast is posted on January 28th, that will be 9 years to the day that we buried my father. And this week also marks 6 months since I last saw my daughter. The last time I spoke to my daughter, the last time we laughed, but certainly not the last time that I cried. I mean, no matter how hard you try, sometimes it's just more difficult. There are days, there are weeks, there are moments that just make it more difficult. I do not believe in wallowing in the sorrow. I try to save a lot of that for my private time, but I've been very blessed to have the family that I have. I've been very blessed to have Amanda as my wife who comforts me and consoles me when I have moments where I simply fall apart and break down. And I have an incredible son. I have wonderful friends. My in-laws are amazing. And I don't want you to think my goal here is to wallow in the sadness. It's just to share and maybe make you laugh and also to make you see that whatever you might be going through, you are not alone. Because for me, this is just a tough week. It just is. The memories of my father, the memories of Peyton. And luckily, there is a light at the end of the tunnel of the week for me, thanks to my wife, Amanda. But it's hard because you love people. You miss people. You care about people. My dad was the life of the party. Everybody loved my dad. My friends loved my dad. Everyone he ever encountered loved my dad. He had his faults, but I can say this. There is no one that has ever walked the face of the earth that ever believed in me more than my father. My father thought the sun rose and set on me. When I gave the eulogy at his funeral, I mentioned how 1 minute he could be having a deep conversation with you on something he had learned that week in Sunday school, talking about God, and the next minute he could venture off into something wildly inappropriate. That's what made him so unique. Like I said, life of the party a little bit too often sometimes. But I can't help it, and I think most people experience things like this. I get sad this time of year because I miss him. It wasn't expected that he would die, but to be honest with you, it wasn't shocking either. He had some physical health issues. He wasn't always in the best of health, quite honestly, mainly due to his drinking. And this time of year, I always think about him. I think about him at Christmas because that's the last time that I spent any real time with him was at Christmas. I had come home. I've told you before, I called my dad every Monday. He was my every Monday phone call on my way home. We usually spoke a couple of times a week, several times a week, but every Monday on my way home from work, I called him to see what he was doing, what he was up to. And I missed those phone calls. It's been 9 years. My dad loved being on the radio with us. And what he really loved was when he was here visiting and someone would recognize me or something like that and come over and say hello and recognize that was my father. Oh my God, I heard you on the radio today. And what he really, really, really loved was if that someone who came over and said they'd heard him on the radio with us was an attractive female. And what he really, 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 really loved was if that attractive female was, maybe in her 20s or something like that. That made his day. That he wouldn't stop talking about the entire time. I could tell you stories about my dad all day I've told this before on the radio. We would go to a restaurant. He would come here. We'd go to a restaurant. And he would start asking, and I knew, and I asked him before, please don't do that. But it was too much fun for him to not do it. He would sit down at the restaurant and the waitress would come over, let's say, and he would start by asking, introducing himself as if she cared. Then he would say, I'm from out of town. Do y'all get a lot of celebrities in here? Don't do that. Please don't do that. Like you get NASCAR drivers, like radio, TV people and stuff that come in here all the time. Please just order your sweet tea and leave it alone. I spent so much of my life with him, a lot of it revolved around sports, especially early in my life. My dad was the coach on my baseball teams through the years. And he was the sponsor of our baseball teams. And in my son's room, my jersey from, I think my 7-year-old Little League team, the Mustangs, who won the championship, by the way, just so you know. My dad ran a mobile home dealership called Cannon Mobile Homes. And that jersey I found one time and had it framed, and it's hanging in my son's room. And my son loves that jersey hanging up in his room because you see the back of it where it says Cannon Mobile Homes. I spent so much of my time at the races with him. My dad drag raced. And so for a long time, my early childhood days, almost every Sunday was spent going with him to the drag races. And we would take trips and little things like for my birthday, my sophomore year of high school, we went to the Cajun Nationals, which is a now defunct big drag race that happened every year in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We went there a couple of times. I remember that time specifically as it was one of the last years they had it, but we went for my birthday. So many wonderful things, wonderful times, just whether it was with my dad fishing or watching wrestling or with sports. And then came him going to charity case shows, which he loved for a variety of reasons, other than the fact that they started late. My dad would, what time do you go on stage? I was like, 11 o'clock. Well, that's going to require a late nap. But my dad loved going to charity case shows for a couple of reasons. Number one, he loved just to go and see the show. He got a kick out of what we were doing up there for a good cause. Number two, he loved to go and see the show because there were a lot of attractive women that would go to the shows, and he really enjoyed that part of it. My dad lived life to the fullest. Quite honestly, maybe if he lived life less to the fullest, he'd still be here today if he'd taken a little better care of himself. But that's been well documented. I think of him often, but especially this time of year, because I think about what could have been. My son and I talk about him often because when we go to the races together, his name always comes up. There are a variety of things that we'll go to, and I always think my dad had the chance to go with me and my son to the drag races a couple of times and to NASCAR races a couple of times, and that stuff was huge for him to share in that with his son and his grandson. Once we went on a tour. We went over to look at Michael Waltrip racing. He would come to town. We'd go to the garages and the different shops and check everything out. And while we were there, I got recognized, and they invited us to come down on the floor. And we took pictures of my son in the cars. And boy, my dad was just, he was down there in and around the cars, able to talk to the guys about the cars themselves and the motors and get the details. And B, he got down there because his son got recognized, and he was on cloud 9. So we talk about him all the time. He died when Cade was 8. and Peyton was 12. And she had really just started to share in his sense of humor. They were pretty close, being the first grandkid. And Cade was still, developing a personality, and they were tight. They always, he'd send him little cars, and that was kind of what their bond was about. But Peyton and my dad bonded mainly from a personality standpoint. And she often talked about how she wished he'd lived a little bit longer because she knew they connected on a different level. They shared the same sense of humor that she was just really beginning to develop when he died. She always commented on how much fun it would have been to have had him around and make him laugh, because it was always a good time if my dad was around. And on my Instagram post about him on Sunday, I pointed out that I wish every kid had a parent who believed in them the way my dad believed in me. And there's a lesson in there if you're a parent. The blind faith, not that he wouldn't ask questions or throw out ideas or wonder about things, but he had a blind belief that I was going to be okay no matter what. In 2011, we were faced with a contract negotiation. We walked away from a contract with a company in the mothership market of Charlotte, gambling on the fact that we had good enough ratings and our reputation was good enough that we would be able to get a better deal in 6 months. And that meant 6 months with no money coming in and no promise that we would have anything at the end of that 6 months. And I was trying to explain it to him on the phone and was asking for his opinion. And I'll never forget, I've never forgotten this. My father said to me, the question is, are you going to bet on yourself? And the way I see it, you bet on yourself your whole career, and it's worked out pretty well, so why stop now? Decision made. And it's always hard when you think about the things this person has missed when you've lost someone. I get it. I know. I tried not to, like when I posted about my dad on Instagram, I started not to do it. And Amanda said, do it if that's what you want to do. If it makes you feel better, do it. Because I see so many people post things like, missing you. And I understand that. I'm not knocking it. It's not my thing to make it so sad. So I tried to post in a way that, hey, this is my dad. He died 9 years ago today. He was funny. He was great. Here's a toast to my dad, that kind of thing, to be a little bit more positive. Because I laugh at all the great times. There's so many things. I could tell you stories for hours about my dad. I love talking about my dad. Was he the best dad in the world? No. But he was the best dad in the world. My heart fills with love, even though my eyes fill with tears. And you expect your parents to die before you. But that doesn't make it any easier. That's kind of the way life works. You kind of know that's going to happen. And my dad had not been in great health for a while. He'd been struggling a little bit, although he died very unexpectedly of a stroke. That doesn't make it any easier every year. And I don't know why, you would think after now 9 years comes and goes and it's okay. And it is in a way. It has to be okay. You have to keep moving forward. My dad certainly would not want us to wallow in the sadness of him not being here today. And I've often said one of the things that I am very thankful for is that my father had a stroke and had to be put on life support. And it's a weird thing. I had called him and spoke to him on a Sunday, and he was in the hospital. And I said, how are you? He said, I'm not doing well. I'm not feeling good at all. I'm struggling a little bit today. Can you call me tomorrow? And I said, yes, this was on a Sunday evening. I said, I'll call you tomorrow like I always do on every Monday. And so on the way home, I called him and got no answer. And I thought, that's weird. But I figured maybe he's out of the room for tests or something. And then I called back a little bit later, about 3:00, and got no answer. And within the hour, my stepmom called and said he'd had a stroke that morning. They'd been running tests and nobody had been in the room and they were trying to figure out what was happening. And I got on a plane the very next morning at 6:30 and got to Louisiana and never spoke to my dad again. So we had to wait a couple days. And the doctor said, here's what we do. We wait a couple days and we figure out what the fog kind of clears, so to speak, when it comes to taking x-rays. And the brain thaws is kind of the word that he used. And we get to see what the damage is and we can kind of figure out what our options are after that. But it was as we expected. It wasn't good. And we had to make a decision, me, my sister, my stepmom. And luckily, one of the things I'm most thankful for in life is that my dad had always let it be known. The moment it looks like he might be on a life support system for any length of time, the decision is made to pull the plug. Because if I know anything about my father, he would never, ever, 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 ever have wanted us to be in that situation. And so we made the decision that he must be taken off life support because that's what he would have wanted. And I'm thankful for the fact that it was such an easy decision for all of us to make. And I miss him dearly. And I feel like I should be telling you something here that will help you. And I'm not. I'm just talking about my dad because it makes me feel better to share it with you. But I hope that you'll see that that's okay if you want to just kind of get caught up in the moment. But what my father would not have allowed is for me to make it an everyday occurrence or make too much out of his death because that would make him sad. But when you combine that with the fact that this week marks 6 months since Peyton died, that's been a lot for me to handle this week. 21 years old. My partner in crime, so to speak. The beautiful thing was, she had my dad's personality. Every room lifted when she walked in. One of the little things that I'm most proud of with her is that she was the go-between with various friend groups, just like I was at her age, and just like I kind of am today with different groups of people. There's something about certain markers in life. Half a year seems to be one of those markers. So why am I talking about this? Why am I telling you about this when I'm saying don't wallow in it? And here I am kind of feeling like I'm wallowing in it, to be honest with you, because here's one thing I've learned. It's okay to cry. It has to be okay. Because I've done a lot of that lately. Several times in the past 3 weeks since our wedding, I have quite honestly cried my eyes out. Sometimes on the way to work. And there's something about the stillness of the morning, because I have about a 35-minute drive into work every day, that makes me think of her. And the possibilities of the day make me miss the possibilities of her life. I'm very blessed, and I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it again, because I'm very blessed that the love of my life, Amanda, can sense a few times, like she did Monday night, when my mind has wandered off to thinking of Peyton, and I'm not really there, missing Peyton. And she'll just come over and give me a hug and give me the chance to fall apart. And I don't know what I would do without Amanda having been around to help me get through this. Here's one thing I've learned. I'm reading a book that someone gave me called Grieving for Dads. Here's the thing. There is no proper way to grieve. It's okay, however you do it, as long as you don't damage yourself in some way. I've learned that it's okay to understand if you've lost a child You now know it will never leave you. It shouldn't, because it wasn't supposed to be that way. You know, I used to tell her when she was little, I would ask her, "Where are you?" She would reply, "Always in your heart." Now, I have to remember that and remind myself of that, just like we all do. She has missed so many things in the past 6 months that she was excited about in her life, in my life, in Amanda's life. But for all the things that she's missed, we have missed her even more at those moments. And it's okay. If you're grieving now for whatever the reason, that's okay. Sometimes you have to move through the world kind of suppressing that a little bit to be strong for others. But you've also got to find a place and a time for you to release that and let it out, or it will eat you alive. Saturday night, we have friends and family in town to celebrate our wedding. I have not seen my mom since I got married. I haven't seen my mom since November, I guess. So my mom and my sister are going to be here Saturday night, and some of my friends are going to be in town. A lot of our friends from here are going to be in town to celebrate our wedding, because they weren't there when we were married, because just a few of us went away. Peyton will be thought of, and she will be talked about all night. And that's going to be joyous and hard at the same time. And that's what I found out a lot about the grieving process, never having experienced anything like this. It is both joyous at times in the laughter and the love, and difficult in the pain of missing someone. But to give you the things that I want to stress, we will look to the future. We will celebrate the past. And yes, we will shed more tears, but more than anything, we will be thankful for the time we had and the memories we have that will live forever. That's what gets me through. That, and knowing that my dad and my daughter would be so proud of me for trying to bring something positive to others in their name, in their spirit. That would make them very proud. I said in my daughter's eulogy, we now, her family, her friends, we now have to laugh a little louder, love a little harder, hug a little tighter, and inspire others more than ever. Because that's what she was going to do. So we have to take that and shine her light for her. And that's also what you have to do to honor the ones you've lost. Because if you could find a way to do that, I believe, at least I know it does for me, it helps you fill some type of a void. In some way, it makes it a little bit easier, because it feels like maybe it didn't all happen for nothing. And I hope that you can find that in your loss or your problems that you're dealing with today, the ability to turn it into something positive and make something positive come out of it, because that will help you. It will make you feel stronger, make you feel better, and help you get through it, but it's not going to make it any easier. So where do we go from here? And what if you need a little assistance? Luckily, I've planned ahead today, and I've got a few answers for you next.
There's more of the new Ace at Large podcast next. Welcome back to the new Ace at Large podcast.
So I honestly don't know if I have done anything to help you today, because maybe today I was a little bit selfish into sharing my own issues of the week and needed you to help me to kind of get some stuff out of my head and out of my heart. But if you are dealing with something today the way I've been, here's an idea. I found a program that's called Grief Share. Now, to be honest with you, I've never been through this. My therapist tipped me off to the program. I wanted to bring something today because I felt like I was being a little self-centered by sharing my stories the way I have, but I wanted to bring something today that you would be able to use. So if you are experiencing grief in some way, there's a thing called Grief Share. It's a 13-week program. It's people who have come together with different losses. There's a curriculum, there's conversation. It's offered at some funeral homes and some churches, but here's the thing. It's a nationwide program. So all you have to do is Google Grief Share and put in your area code, and it will give you options close to you, or Grief Share in your town, GRIEFSHARE, 2 words. And there may be a website. It may be griefshare.com. I'm not sure, but Google Grief Share and put in your area code. And it's a very well thought of program. 13 weeks, people who come together with different losses. And there's some stuff you read. It's open to conversation. And a lot of times it turns into, it's a support group, but it turns into a group of friends continuing to support each other for a long time. Again, it's called Grief Share. And I hope if you are experiencing some type of loss, some type of grief, and having a difficult time dealing with it, that that's something that you'll check into, because it sure would make me feel better for taking up your time today just telling you stories and not maybe being as helpful as I normally would be. I leave you with this, that it's okay. The most important thing from today is it's okay. However it is you choose to grieve. I talk about my daughter a lot. We all talk about my daughter a lot. And I would have thought initially after 6 months we wouldn't as much, but I don't know. I've never dealt with this, and I think I'll probably do that for the rest of my life. And I talk about my dad a lot still. He comes up all the time in conversations with friends and family. And my friends loved my dad, and he will come up in conversation this weekend when they're in town. And oddly enough, Friday evening, I've got a few of my friends that are coming in, and my mom and my sister will be in town. And it just so happens that 6 months to the day from Peyton's death, they will be here, just as they were 6 months ago, the day before her funeral and her wedding. Same guys will be in town. My mom and my sister will be in town. And they'll all be at my house. And we'll share a laugh, and we'll share stories, and we'll probably shed a tear, 12, along the way. But remember this, you're going to get through it. We're going to get through it. And always remember that one day you will tell your story of how you've overcome what you're going through now. And it will become part of someone else's survival guide. God bless you. I'll see you next week.
This is the new Ace at Large podcast. The new Ace at Large podcast will be back next Thursday.